Okay, good afternoon. Welcome to the BroadCAST webinar series from the UNL Center for Academic Success and Transition. I'm Dan Hutt, and we are absolutely thrilled to have with us today from Lincoln, Nebraska, author, actress, singer, many other things, the Lincoln Queen of Jazz and Blues, Annette Murrell. Annette, it is such a pleasure and an honor to have you with us here today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. We'll begin right away with your college career, if we may. And we want to talk about a number of different things today. I'll be referring pretty frequently as well to your wonderful book, I Want to Be a Bad Woman, your poetry anthology, and as well as to your records as well. But we'll start off with your educational career. You hold degrees from vastly different institutions. Stanford, the University of Nairobi in Kenya, a PhD in English from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. We would like to know a little about your experience at each place. Frank of Omaha specifically asks, and Tabby of Omaha, Mitch of Syracuse, and Seth of Petersburg would like to know, did you have a favorite of those three institutions? I'm sure they were very, very different.
You know, they were different times of my life. I actually didn't know anything about Stanford. All I knew was I wanted to actually go to Harvard. And I have forgiven her since, but found out that my mother tossed out my application. I had sent for an application and my mother really didn't know what it was and just kind of tossed it out, or so that's what she says. I just don't think she wanted me to go away. But I just saw that there was a school in California and I wanted to go. I was the kind of kid I wanted to get away from home.
Yeah.
So it wasn't until after I got accepted into Stanford that I was told what Stanford was, so that it was, I guess, an achievement. So that was like, but is it still in California? So that's what I was.
Right.
And so, I'm 18 years old and I just wanted to leave, So Stanford, I wasn't a particularly good student at Stanford. It's by San Francisco, and I spent a lot of time in San Francisco and Oakland going to jazz clubs and just being I was raised in a very strict background, and I was the stereotypical girl who was sort of imprisoned at home, and once Rapunzel was let out of the tower, I just had a ball. So I wasn't a particularly good student, although I did enjoy a lot of my classes. And
I can't blame you for that being in San Francisco. My goodness, what a great place to be in
it was
school.
Wonderful. And then I realized that I actually took some classes from some, really like the tops, people who created their fields. But I did enjoy a number of classes there. But overall, I can't say that I was a very happy undergraduate student. Then the University of Nairobi was just a one-year exchange program that Stanford had. It had a relationship with all kinds of different institutions, across the globe. And so I went to University of Nairobi. That was interesting because Jomo Kenyatta, the first president after they declared independence, died, and they were having their first election. Actually, there was another president in place, and they were having elections, and he was throwing everybody in jail, and the students went on strike. Although we've had our kind of a history here, I don't think a lot of American students realize how powerful student protest is in other countries. And so the students just went on strike and the military was sent out. So, it was just, my eyes were just open. The campus was shut down and closed. So we were tossed out of the dorms and had to live in the Nairobi in the city. And so that was a big adventure. And I was young enough to see it as an adventure.
Yeah.
So that was a lot. So that was interesting. But I think in terms of academics, UNL was my favorite because when I went to grad school, I was determined to make up for being a bad undergraduate. And I had a vision of what I wanted to do. And so I did well academically. And for the most part, I enjoyed almost all the classes that I took, although I had some trouble in some of them. And by trouble, I meant in terms of, by then I'm in my 40s. And so sometimes professors would say things that I thought were racist or sexist or some kind of ist, and I spoke up. And that's sometimes that gets very tiresome, but I felt I had to speak up. So I had a lot of battles.
Were you a literature and writing student from the get-go?
No, I wasn't. And actually, some of these things I don't think I really should be sharing with people, but at Stanford, again, I basically looked up, I'm like, wow, I'm a senior and I need to graduate. And so I sat down and looked at everything that I had taken. And I said, oh, I could graduate in African American studies. If I stay another quarter, I could get a degree in English. Or if I stayed another year, I could get a degree in history. So I decided African American studies. It was very brand new. And some of my family was very upset to hear that I got a degree in that.
Why is that?
Well, as my sister said, my late sister, she said, quote, I can't give you the full quote, but why the F do you want a degree in Black people? You're born Black. You don't need a degree in being Black.
Oh.
And so, but in the end, it turned out to really be a great major because it was completely interdisciplinary. So I was taking economics, history, literature, music, some theater. And then we had a lot of very interesting guest lecturers who are coming out, to Stanford. And I also at that time, there was a lot of, I don't know what it's like now at Stanford, there was a lot of money at that time for students. So I basically wrote a grant and got funded to go to the Southern Black Arts Festival, where I met like all kinds of icons of Black writing, Toni Cade Bambara, Margaret Walker, Etheridge Knight. It was just wonderful. It was in Atlanta, Georgia. So I had a lot of wonderful experiences, although there was a lot of difficulties at Stanford too, because that was also at the time of, I just forgot his name, but he was the first white person who claimed reverse discrimination because he didn't get into the medical school. And so there was a lens was focused on all of basically Black students, but all of the students, minority students. And even though, all of us graduated at the top of our class, we tested well, there was like, you got into Stanford because you're Black, blah, 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 not because, you had merit. And so that was going on at that time, which made it difficult for all of us.
So you had been taking classes because they were interesting for you, not because they fit into any particular program.
I didn't know what
and
I
you'd
wanted
done
to
this.
Major in.
You had done this for several years.
Yes,
and then
I think that I was supposed to I need to be getting out of this school.
I think that sounds like how you should do it.
Well,
you followed your
say
interest and
that,
inclination.
but it wasn't the way you were supposed to have done it back then.
Well, now neither. But students are encouraged to declare a major yesterday.
And you don't know what you want to make. There's very few of us. Well, okay, there are some who do know. But I was not, a minority, in that regard. There were a lot of other students who just didn't know, you just went to college.
Right.
You got out of high school, and
it was next.
For many of us, we were first generation college attendees, and you were just
me too.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well,
absolutely.
my family wanted me to be a doctor or something, but I knew very early on that I did not want to pursue that. I took a lot of pre-med classes in high school. I worked in a morgue. I mean, I did all kinds I worked with scientists. And even though it was very interesting, I knew very early that was not my calling.
Yeah. I kind of did what you did in college here at UNL. Except I declared every time I changed directions. I changed my major 10 times.
Oh, wow. What did it wind up being?
Well, I ended up with exactly the same combination of major and minors that I started with back in the English department with late Les Whip. He was my mentor, if you remember.
Oh, I know Les,
yeah. But in any case, sometimes you got to take the long way around, right?
But I'm glad that's one of the things I also like about English, because
Hmm.
I think it's one of the few majors where you really have a legitimate reason to dabble into everything.
Yes,
Because when you're reading a piece of literature, I mean, there's history behind it.
exactly.
And, even science. I mean,
Science,
science, and there's certainly
anthropology,
anthropology and
you name it,
sociology, and so
political
language
science.
oftentimes.
Yeah.
So if one of the things about English is that in order to, because we're so focused on thinking critically and interpreting text, you will automatically default have to look at a lot of different things. And of course, the whole idea of disciplines is kind of, an invention anyway. But
Hmm. Hmm. We've made it our business in Nebraska Promise to violate all of those boundaries
good,
from
good,
the
good,
get-go. And we want to talk to you about a lot of that
yeah,
as far as the liberal
yeah.
arts goes and whatnot. We've already been into this a little bit, but I want to ask you, it's kind of one of our stock questions in the broadcast series. What do you think of the concept of college as a time to academically experiment, maybe even get a little lost while you test the waters and you find your pathway? It sounds like that's, in
Well,
a
I wish
sense,
that's
what
the
you
way it would
did.
be. I wish that
Hmm.
that, that it
I
were
do
that
too.
way. And well, I guess more than years ago. I guess we're talking, centuries ago, when you would finish a certain part of your education and then you would travel. And
Hmm.
the whole concept there was that you really were young and you had to see something of the world before you could settle down into something that you thought you were going to do forever. And
Yeah.
but our culture really does not allow for that.
Hmm.
You have to really go against the grain of our culture to do that, because our culture is so production oriented that we must produce. Like when you're in kindergarten, you must know what you want to be, and
Oh.
then you have to pursue that. But you don't
Hmm.
know, and I think it's okay to be lost. I think it's okay to wander in and out of departments. Even wandering in and out of departments, you kind of know what you want to major in just by the feel of the department. A physics department and a math department feel much different. That modern languages is a much different department than the English department. So I
That's
think it's just
right.
good to take a class in everything and just kind of get the feel of how people kind of exist in those academies.
Absolutely. I'm with you there. And I know exactly what you mean about
Yeah,
the feel of the different
yeah,
departments. I wandered into Westbrook Music Hall for about a half an hour one afternoon and switched my major. But
yeah,
I knew right away the feel of the hallways was very sterile for
yeah.
me. And not that it is. There are music majors in my
No,
classes,
they're in
but
their rooms doing really cool things, but the hallways.
yeah. Yeah. And music is like the one part of my life that no one else has a piece of. So I don't want any rules or anything.
Well,
I
again, I'm always sharing things I probably shouldn't share, but one of the funny
love
things
it.
is that I went to therapy when I was in an English department, and the funny thing was I'd always see another English major there, and then one time there were about 5 of us there, and we said, I think we're the only department that gets therapy.
Absolutely.
You never even saw a psychology major in the counseling department.
You know what? I think
So
you're
I
onto
don't know. I think it's
something
just
there.
something about English majors. We're that kind of ragtagly, kind of
Well,
always wondering about
yeah.
ourselves, wondering about the world,
Yeah.
full
It,
of
it
angst.
can't. I did my graduate studies in English at Kansas State University, and it's in the same building as the counseling services office. So yeah, I know what you mean.
They knew who their
uh,
core patient
that's
demographic was.
right.
Yeah,
That's
right.
right.
That's right.
And that, as you know, the wonderful essay that you wrote for us about what constitutes success, finding your authentic self, is a big hit in all of the CAST programs. A number of my students have written about your writing, and two lines in your essay really stand out
Yeah.
for me, and I think for a lot of people that way. And I want to start with the first one. I do not believe that if you work hard, you can be anything you wish. And that's such a jarring sentence to read, even for
Well,
me, even though I think anybody would say, yeah, that's probably true, but you don't go around saying
saying it.
that because it's
Yeah,
contrary to what we've been told since we were
exactly.
little kids. But I think it suggests a real perseverance. I love the way that you posit that as a shifting of values to not what you want to be, but how you want to be. That's so
Exactly.
healthy.
Exactly. And that doesn't mean, and I was thinking about that. You know, I'm not saying don't pursue your dreams. And that's but
Right.
I think there was that one, I forget, it was this documentary about, how so many young boys, particularly young black men, see being a football star or a basketball star as sort of being what they want to be. But I think
Mm-hmm.
all of us know that, yes, you can work hard, but there is also a certain amount of innate talent that you
Right.
have to have. I think the same way with music. I mean,
Sure.
there are people who have a lot of talent in music who aren't going to have the kind of success that they may see other people have. There's not everybody's going to be Beyonce or
Mm-hmm.
that's a person of your but my generation, but not everybody's going to be an Ella Fitzgerald. But all I had to
Mm-hmm.
do was listen to her to know that I couldn't sing like her. But I don't.
Right.
But it doesn't have to diminish the fact that I enjoyed singing. If
Mm-hmm.
you want to,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't have to diminish the fact that you enjoy playing sports. But I'm so proud of my great nephew, my niece's son. He's been athletic all his life. He plays all the sports, baseball, football. Then he wrestles. He's a fanatical workout person, and he got a scholarship to go to a small college in football. But he was also very, very clear that he also wants to go there to learn and
Mm.
that his options
Good
are
for
open.
him.
And he doesn't, and so he's not denying himself his own pleasure of being in athletics, but he's also not saying that if I don't get on this football team and if I don't turn pro, then my life
Mm-hmm.
is over. And I think it
Right.
really is about how you want to be a person, how you want to enjoy the journey. Um, and I think of my own son. He's 35, but sometimes he's kind of like 5. And I went out here, we were sitting around talking, and I said, if you could really have your wish of what you absolutely really wanted to be in life, and what he wants to really be in his heart of hearts, he wants to be he wants to be a ninja who boards these illegal fishing vessels. And he wants to, through his martial arts, and have a gang of martial artists go in there and board those boats and save those whales and those dolphins. Okay, so I'm not going to say it's not going to happen, but the fact that he's living in Omaha working for an insurance firm,
Yeah, it's a
but
little ways
but he's
away.
also been taking martial arts since he was 5 years old, and he loves martial
Yeah.
arts. And now he's teaching younger people. He has a son now, teaching his
Mm-hmm.
son martial arts. So the how he's living, I'm not going to say that it is not possible, but I do know that if he turns 70 and doesn't have a chance to board an illegal fishing vessel, that he will never say that he's disappointed because he has still lived his dream of learning several martial arts, and his son, is the light of his life and those kinds of things. So it's how we live our
Absolutely.
lives. But that's
It
hard to do
sure
because
is.
our culture does not want us to think that way.
That's exactly right. From the question you asked from the time you're a little kid is, what do you want to be when you grow
Yes,
up?
and not only what do you want to
So,
be, but don't you plan to be the best at it?
mm,
I mean,
absolutely.
everybody has to be a Jeff Bezos, although I don't know why. I mean, other than the money, why would you really want to be him? But
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
if I had to
Yeah.
choose a billionaire, I'd probably be our own little Omaha billionaire. He seems to be a
Mm-hmm.
nicer person, although I don't know him. But we just don't allow people just to live.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, what I'm working on at this phase of my life, and just to kind of a little bit of disclosure, I had COVID. I almost died. I was on the respirator for a week. I lost my singing voice due to
Oh,
COVID. I lost my mother to COVID. And so this is like
My
literally a brand
condolences.
new chapter. My whole life was kind of focused around caring for my mother, who died one day before her 100th birthday.
Oh my goodness.
And so, I was a caregiver, and I realized after she died, that's how I had begun to define myself for many years. And so now I'm 63. For whatever reasons, I was spared. I was allowed to live. I just bought a house, and the only goal I have right now is to retire. I really don't have any. I'm just trying to be pretty much unambitious and just enjoy the Sundays when my son and grandson come over, enjoy my family. And that's just something that it's for me, because I was raised to be ambitious. I was also raised not only to be ambitious for myself, but when you went to a school like Stanford, and cut me off if I'm going on too long.
No.
But when you went to, like, when you were Black, being Black and having gone to a school like Stanford, it wasn't just yourself. You were going for all the Black people in the universe, all the Black people in America, all of your ancestors, all of the people who, because, before, say what you want about quota systems, before there was one, Stanford didn't let Black people in. Stanford didn't let people of Hispanic or Mexican origins in, Latino origins in. I think there were 2 Native Americans, maybe 3 Native Americans when I was at Stanford. So they did not let us in. And so for all of the people who worked, who sacrificed to let people like me in, part of my upbringing was, so you better grow up to be a judge, or you better grow up to own a business. You better grow up to be something fabulous. You better grow up to be vice president,
really make it count.
Because really make it count, because look what everyone did for you to go there. And so in some ways, I do carry a sense of failure, not because when I look at the totality of my life that I've actually am a failure, but because I didn't achieve what I was told I was supposed to achieve. And I think we have a lot. I saw an article the other day, I didn't read it. I guess the new term is crushing it. And the author asked, do we always have to crush it? And I think that's the same thing. Do we always have to be the very creme de la creme? And I don't know if our culture is giving us room to just be.
It's not, and Annette, it's striking similarities. The last speaker, the last guest on BroadCAST that joined us a few weeks ago was musician Jacob Slichter, also an African-American studies major in college. And he talked about that same thing. And he talked about the pressure in our culture to having to stick the landing every time, like you're in the Olympics, and that's just not a healthy way to go through life.
No, it's not. And I have this is not just an isolated story, but there was a young man who was at Stanford, and, we all sort of came up in that generation, and he actually had a nervous breakdown because he got an A- in a class, which meant that his dreams of going to Yale Law School were over. Now, his dreams of going to law school weren't over.
Right.
In his world, I don't want to say his world, it was our world. Once you were in Stanford, you had to follow up with grad school at a top school. And so he wasn't going to go to Yale. And then, of course, and then you have all these people saying that as Black people, we were inferior, we shouldn't have been at Stanford anyway. And it completely broke him. It broke him. They carried him out to a hospital. It completely shattered him as a person, and we shouldn't do that to people.
I totally agree. In your essay, you shift the emphasis away towards an exploration of what is your authentic self. And I just love the way that you posited in the essay. It's so beautiful. You ask, what is your authentic self? It is the person you were before you were forced to color only inside the lines. That is just absolutely sublime. It's got a wonderful subversive nonconformity to it. Those lines are just touching?
Well, I think I actually stole that from someone. I
Even
don't remember
better.
where I read it, but I think I did. But but I think it's true, and I also have to. So here's where I'm going to get a little academic, because
Okay.
I guess I'm still a kind of a. It's funny to say old-fashioned, but now I guess I'm sort of an old-fashioned deconstructionist, and that this whole idea, or post-structuralist, where I'm kind of on, I guess, both sides of the aisle. But this whole notion of the self is kind of a construction.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, but can you get to a construction that fits you the best, that feels the most comfortable, And so when I say authenticity, I mean, I actually kind of have to interrogate that term. But for me, authenticity is kind of like being able to, if you will, to live life in your pajamas, to always be comfortable, to not feel as if you're putting on a show, to find those things in life that you enjoy doing. And so, we do live in a culture where you have to earn money in order to live. So hopefully those things you enjoy, you're earning money by some of them. And so that you're able to live a life that feels whole to you and doesn't feel like, so that when you get to be 50 and 60, you're not the kind of person that wants to run away from your life to open a bed and breakfast.
Right.
Doing it wrong all this time.
And you're the only one that knows the answers to those questions. And I love
you have to settle. I mean, and sometimes, that's another term I'm interrogating, because having said what I've just said, I can't really say that, and I'm at my day job, so I have to whisper. I can't really say that my day job is my dream job, but it's a dream job in the sense that I have no stress from it. I don't take it home with me. It pays me enough where I am able to buy a house and support myself and do the kinds of things I like to do. And I don't make an awful lot of money, but it's just me. And so,
that sounds delightful.
Yes, but my weekend gig as a radio announcer, now that I kind of sacrifice for, because believe me, there are some days I really wish I could sleep in on Saturdays and Sundays. But I so enjoy, I've done it for 15
I'm glad you
years.
don't.
I love being an announcer that fulfills, something in me that I need. And so I'm willing to, and when I say settle, I don't mean that kind of sad settling, like, I'm gonna settle in this bad relationship.
Right.
That this may not be exactly what I want, but it feels good enough that until something else comes along, there's an old song called you may not be an angel, but then again you'll do. Until that day that one comes along, I'll string along with you. And that's kind of how I feel about my life. I'll string along with you until that angel comes.
I love that. Now, I was thinking about those lines about a time in your childhood before you were taught to color only inside the lines, and then I was looking through your poetry anthology, and I was reading the poem "Searching for Vietnam," and if I can read a line, I'd like to read a line if I may, because I make a connection between the two in some ways. You write, "Because after long weary years of wandering, I have yet to find the exit out of the desert of my childhood." Just a beautiful line. And that emphasis, or that allusion to the innocence of youth, I think is a great avenue towards what we're talking about with the authentic self, or the unforced self, the essence of self, if there is such a thing. But I bet you would say that you don't have to go back that far, that it's never too late to find that.
No, I don't think so. And part of what that poem, it's interesting that you mentioned it, because what it's about, again, was that expectation. I mean, when my mother brings me into the background to this classroom, I mean, this actually happened. She said, my daughter's a straight A student. And so of course the teacher goes, well, that's a straight A student. And that go to the board, go to the map and find Vietnam. And of course, we hadn't studied Vietnam in my high school. So I'm over there in Mexico, But when I went home, I was a failure. not because I personally failed, but also as a Black student, a child who was supposed to be smart. I let down everybody who had who had paved the way for me. And so, of course, I went home and I learned everything I could about Vietnam. But there's a part of me that feels like that, not that I don't want to be challenged, but that shouldn't have, I don't think that should have happened. And part of that wandering, not being able to get out of it, although I think I found the exit, still just walking down there, is that I don't have to accept those burdens. When I was a child, I felt I had to. When I was a young adult, I felt I had to. When I was in my 30s, I felt I had to. And somewhere along the line in my 40s, I think in terms of raising my own son, I just suddenly realized
it's not my responsibility.
It's not my responsibility, and I don't want to put those burdens on him. I wanted to put, don't get me wrong, I wanted him to have a sense of self, and I wanted him to go after something in life. But I never wanted to put the burden of the entire race or my expectations on him.
Right. Now, to continue on with that notion of exploring and challenging yourself in college and whatnot, I love the words in your poem for a white boy. In your anthology. I love the line, the false assumption that safety is your inalienable right. And you're talking about safety or insulation from ideas in the classroom, which is, of course, anathema to the purpose of college itself. I think those words are I mean, they're always part and parcel of college, but they're particularly applicable now with the controversy of critical race theory and whatnot. But it's part and parcel of college, right? Learning about the perspectives and experiences of others. Yeah, exactly. It's how you understand the world better. Discomfort is a big part of that, right?
Yes. And I'm glad you brought. I was thinking about this, about the whole the critical race thing, which is so funny, because you have all these parents of these uprisings in these elementary and junior and senior high where it's not even being taught. But what you hear often is, I don't want my child to be uncomfortable. I don't want my child. My child didn't have anything to do with slavery. And I've actually heard students, when I was teaching, I would have students say, well, that's not my fault, And one of the things, and I forget who said it, I think it was Rabbi Herschel, who said, you may not be guilty, but you're still responsible. And it's kind of like, if you think about our whole thing about climate change, although that's kind of controversial too, but to not put it in terms of, look, if I want to live in a world where everyone has access to clean water, where everyone has access to education, where everyone has access to a good life and to a good future, well, I may not have been personally responsible for all of those barriers that hinder people from having those things. But I can tell you, even though I'm Black, as an American, a person living in a quote unquote first world country, I certainly do profit by the misery of a lot of our folks who do not, who are living in underdeveloped countries. I mean, they're the ones paying, there are women, those are the people in China, making like a dime an hour so I can have an iPhone. Those are people who are being exploited, so that I can wear a certain kind of undergarment, all those kinds of things. I mean, I do gain privilege. So the question becomes not, well, first of all, what's wrong with feeling guilty? You should. If I do feel guilty about it, the question isn't, well, I don't want to feel bad. The question is, what small thing can I do in my own life to help change that? So for me, for me, it was investing in a Brita filter so that I could cut down on bottled water. For me, my son actually got us into
that makes
recycling.
It real.
But my son got us into recycling. He was about 10 years old, and he was a very much, recycle. And back then when he wanted to do it, I'm not gonna say it was rather inconvenient, but we did it, and I still do it. And it's the same thing about racial justice. What can you do? Well, about, I'm not responsible for all the women who get raped, or no, I didn't directly responsible for all women who get raped and beat up. But I feel a sense of responsibility. And part of what I did was I tried to raise a young man who didn't have a macho view of himself and a macho view of his entitlement over women. So, we have to just think about the small ways in which we can do our part, because we're all responsible.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, I lost my train of thought there,
I'm sorry.
No, we're onto a couple really interesting points here, I think. Now, I'm going to ask you to think back to your undergraduate days a little bit, and you took classes in a lot of different areas. What I think is just delightful. Oh, I know what I was going to say. If I can backtrack for just a second, pardon me. We in our curriculum in CAST, the Center for Academic Success and Transition, we have a whole unit on. We call it getting outside your comfort zone. And I think that's embracing exactly what you're talking about. I'm a music guy, Annette, so I put it in a music context, and I say you can't experience life in college like it's a clean MP3. You got to get down in the surface noise of a vinyl record and hear that crackle and hiss, right? Yeah, absolutely.
I love it.
Where I was going though, you've taken classes in your undergraduate career delightfully in many, many different areas. What were some of those courses that were most impactful for you outside of literature? Do you recall?
Well, yeah, I took a history class from Claiborne Carson, who is the foremost historian of the Black Civil Rights Movement, one of the foremost. And he gave us primary source materials. So we studied from, SNCC, the Black Panthers. I mean, we just thought, this wasn't what you get in your average little history course. It was a very good seminar. I also took a class, and I'm trying to remember what it was called, but it was by Howard Mancall, who, he was like one of the foremost authorities on Mao. And you have to remember, when I was in college, being a socialist was not a dirty word. In fact, it was like the hip word. In fact, you kind of had to make it unhip to really get to the meat of it, because everybody wanted to have holes in their jeans and tout the revolution, But it was a fascinating class, and it helped to shape. Although my politics really got shaped in 7th grade by a teacher of mine. But that really helped to kind of shape what I proudly will say my leftist politics. Another class that I really enjoyed was when I was an art history class. And I enjoyed that not so much because of the art, but because the instructor, whose name I do not remember, he was the classiest, most articulate professor. And I love language. And I'm someone who stumbles over her words. One of the reasons why I write is because I'm much more articulate writing than I am verbally. But this was a man who had a turn of a phrase in an instant. And he was just, at the end of the class, he saluted us with a champagne, he gave close to us, And I just remember saying, I wish I could weave words and be as eloquent as he was. Another class I took was Philip Zimbardo. He's a famous psychologist who's a little on the, he was always kind of out there. I think he's probably getting a little bit out there more now, but he introduced us to sex workers in his psychology class. He did a lot of things that they were like him and another guy named Cacciadorian. They were really the first to offer a human sexuality class. So one of the things I enjoyed is I was always, the things that people take for granted now, they were just trying these things out when I was in college. I enjoyed all those classes. And not because, the human sexuality class, what I enjoyed most was the politics of it. We didn't say, this is, and back then we were talking about transgendered people, although they didn't have that word. And they were presented to us not as pathologies, but as different types of of defining yourself sexually. So I'm just really glad that I had all those opportunities just to be open.
Oh, it sounds extraordinary.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Jake of B asks Annette, if you could go back and tell your college undergrad self one thing to change, what would it be?
Not to be so hard on myself. And this is nothing that I'm ashamed of, but I'd always been a very depressed child. I tried to commit suicide when I was 9 years old. And I think a lot of that was because I couldn't take the burden that a lot of people were throwing on me. And so when I was in college, if I made a B, that was a defeat. If I didn't achieve something, that was a defeat. And it wasn't only a defeat, but that meant that I wasn't a good person. I was inadequate. And now they call it that. What do they call it? The sense of being an imposter syndrome.
Yeah, imposter syndrome.
They didn't have that word back then, and I always thought I was an imposter. And I realized that I was a much brighter, much more talented, and I was also braver than I give myself credit for, because despite my own fragility, emotional fragility, God, I was pretty resilient little kid. I just kept trying, I really did not waver. I think because there was something inside me that knew I was living in a land of bullshit, and that someday I would find my way.
Right. If you just hung in there.
Yeah.
I'd like to shift our discussion a bit away from education now towards yourself and your own background in writing, music, theater. We've spent some time in class the last few weeks, Annette, talking about the wonderful liberal arts blend that you represent in all of your pursuits that way. Dell of Falls City and Connor of Syracuse ask, have you over the years considered one of those areas always your forte? I suspect singing.
No, writing.
Is writing okay?
Even though I haven't written anything in a couple of years. Well, the thing that's kind of not true. But I don't focus on publishing really. Yeah. But I do feel that there is ever since I was little, I mean, the first time I ever made a connection between a picture in a book and the word, that so just excited me. And I always wrote because I had to. Writing I can't say it's ever really been pleasurable, but it's always been necessary. And so that's the thing that I think I do the best. And even at my job, I mean, I just, even if it's writing a memo, I mean, I have to craft a really good memo. So I like writing. Singing.
You're an extraordinary writer, prose and poetry.
Well, it's just something that
Is it effortless for you?
Well, I love language. I mean, a good sentence will just bowl me over. And I still remember there's this line from a Nadine Gordimer, right? The South African writer. And she writes a short story, and it's a couple who are like spooning after making love. And the sentence is, lying on the shores of your body attained. I'm sorry. This is I always have to pause.
That's something else.
Lying on the shores of your body attained. I guess if I ever have a goal, is to write a sentence that beautiful, that evocative, that beautiful. So
you have.
I love language. But singing, I've always, and it's interesting because I can't physically sing because my vocal cords were damaged by the rod they put it in your throat when they put you on a ventilator. I bent my vocal cords and I got a very bad infection. I actually can hear my raspiness. I'm just now getting my speaking voice back. And I'm glad, because I thought I was going to have to quit my radio job. So I'm glad. And while I love music, and I, I think I can live without singing. I don't think I
Mm-hmm.
can live without writing. And when I say
Yes.
writing, I don't necessarily have to have it, um, make it public,
Right.
but I have to be able to write.
That's a wonderful distinction, and I wanted to ask you about that as well. You write a little bit, or you allude to that a little bit in the intro of your anthology, and it reminds me the idea of your motives for writing. And my mentor back in college used to Les Whip used to say, "It makes me nervous to see my name in print." He didn't need that sort of ego trip of
Yeah,
publishing all
yeah,
the time. But you write in the introduction, and you're talking about your friends prompting of you to stop fucking around waiting for some authority to acknowledge my talent and to publish my own work.
yeah.
I just love the wording of that and the sentiment behind
Well,
it.
you know, who
Stay
told me that was
away,
Kathy
editors.
Acker. The writer
Uh-huh.
Kathy Acker told me that. And she is one of
Hmm.
the few writers
Yes,
I've
that's
met
right. Yeah.
who were who I felt was a genuinely good person. And
Hmm.
and it's funny given the titles of her books, you know, you might think just, but she was just a wonderful, wonderful woman. And I got to meet her, I got to have dinner with her. But you know, it's interesting because that poetry book, as well as my Zubar Live at the Zubar album,
Hmm. Hmm.
I had a major breakdown. I had a major psychotic manic episode, and I had it in
Hmm.
public. I had it in a classroom, um,
Hmm.
but I was a lot of things were happening, and a lot of it was I was around. And you know, no offense to your students, but I spent I spent a lot of years around very, very racist, sexist students who made my life miserable. I can count on my hands, two hands, the number of students um, whom I adored, and that wasn't because they were all talented. I'm talking about students who were just open. But I had a
Hmm.
lot of students who would say things like, you know, I don't want to hear. I don't want to hear what you have to say. I don't want to hear about this multiculturalism. That was the buzzword then. And my response was, why are you taking an African American literature class? I mean, I don't get this. So, so, and the thing about it is that I admire people of color who have been able to teach successfully because I found it a very painful experience. And so what led up to it, I was already under stress. I was not getting any kind of support from colleagues, including women. And finally, I had a student assault me, not sexually assault me, but he shoved me up against my desk because he was angry at me because I wouldn't accept an assignment that he had turned in late. He was a non-traditional student. He was like 40, but it also turns out this student had a history. He had beat up his wife before, so he had a
Hmm.
history of violence. Anyway, that night I flipped and I was psychotic for about 5 days before I wound up in the hospital, or it could have been shorter. I can't remember all the details. So I'm only telling you this to tell you that that poetry book and that CD were part of my healing because
Hmm.
I was fired over it. I was fired a year before tenure. And I that book and my CD, I did all the artwork, I produced it, I self-published. I just had to speak my piece. And I had to do it in a way that I just didn't want an editor to say, you can't use that
Yeah.
word, or I don't like the length of this.
It
So
sounds
it was very,
remarkably
very,
therapeutic.
yeah, it was therapeutic, but it was also about professional integrity. And
Hmm.
that's why, you know, Scott Stanfield wrote the back page blurb, and William Clefcorn
I saw that.
wrote
Yeah.
the preface. And so,
Yep.
you know, that gave me a real sense of, not that these two people legitimized me, but they were two people that I admired who
Right.
thought enough of my book to lend their credence and their name to it. And so that helped me heal. And well, now I'm not just
Absolutely.
talking about healing mentally. I'm talking about healing from the sense of failure from not becoming a tenured professor, which, by the
Hmm.
way, I hated. I hated being a professor. And I really believe that breakdown, just one quick story, I became a certified peer support and wellness specialist. And I worked in mental health for about 6-7 years after that and really loved that work. I worked at the Lincoln Regional Center as a peer specialist. And I advocated for the people who are incarcerated in our mental institutions. But I walked into a seminar for people to do some work on some mental health concepts. And I said that I had a breakdown. And this one woman said, "Wasn't that the best experience of your life?" And I thought about it. And I'm like, yeah, it really was, because it saved me. I believe we're talking about our authentic self. I think that was my authentic self. I think that I was so determined to be someone and do something that I had no love for, because what else do you do with a PhD in English? You teach, and you do 30 years of teaching. And this is not, I mean, people who want this field, beautiful. It's like people want to be a doctor, beautiful. But that wasn't, neither one of those was me. And I didn't have the fortitude to take a lot of what a lot of teachers of color and a lot of women take as teachers. And it just was just eating me. And I really do believe that that was part of myself saying, if you won't save yourself, I'll save you. And after that, that's when I really began that journey to figure out, what do I want to be? Who do I want to be? How do I want to be?
How do I want to be? Absolutely. Annette, what's your favorite part of jazz and blues music?
Well,
a lot of students want to know about that.
I like classic jazz. And what that would really be music that's, I like from the 40s to around the 60s, 70s. I love Coltrane. I love a lot of different singers, Dakota Staten. I love Dinah Washington, Ella Fitzgerald, but I also like some people that maybe don't get a lot of play. There's a woman named Renee Lee, who's a Black woman who lives in Canada, who's an extraordinary singer. I love Diane Reeves, and obviously she's post 60s, but I really love, and I love instrumental music more than I love vocal music, actually. So that's the kind of jazz, but I also like classical. I don't care for really big orchestrated music. I like small ensembles. I love Baroque. And I think Baroque has a lot in common with jazz. So those are the kinds of music that I like the best.
Josie of Ainsworth and Landon.
I also love James Taylor.
Oh, there you go.
Nothing to do with jazz, but I just love James Taylor. No, I have every single album he ever made, and I've seen him like 5 times. Okay.
I'm a big James Taylor fan myself, actually. Josie of Ainsworth and Landon of Bertrand ask about your reading tastes, and if you read more fiction, nonfiction.
I tend to, ever since I had that breakup, I'd rather call it a breakup than a breakdown. I have a hard time reading long pieces. Although as soon as I say those things, then I can see I love Octavia Butler. I do love really good science fiction. I love creative nonfiction. Not necessarily, although a lot of memoirs are creative nonfiction, but not necessarily memoirs, but when people sort of take their lived experience and create a sort of a fictive world. What's the guy's name? Von Ocean, the Vietnamese. No, he's not Vietnamese. Yeah, he's a Vietnamese writer. I really loved his work. Yeah.
Okay, very good. Well, I want to talk to you just a bit, if I may, about your 2005 album Live at the Zoo Bar that we alluded to earlier. I was listening to it again this morning at 5:30 a.m. I have a good hi-fi system at home, and I put the headphones on and sat down on the floor, and I just can't believe how great that record is. I particularly love your rendition of Barbara Streisand's What Are You Doing the Rest of Your Life? That sounds like it should be on the James Bond soundtrack. I just love that. But what was that night like at the making of that record? What was it like to play at the zoo?
That album really memorializes that night. I'm not so sure that I see it as a musical work. It's less of a musical work and more of
an experience.
An archive, a record of that night. That was it was a birthday celebration. A friend of mine, Dean Heist, who does a lot of music around town and who operates Incorporated. He got me a Nebraska naval, an admiral of the Nebraska Navy. It was also declared. I think that was that day. One of my birthdays was declared Annette Murrell Day by the mayor.
Oh my goodness.
And there were a lot of friends who came, and it was just a good time. I wasn't particularly pleased with the quality of the recording. And there were these really two drunk people right in front of the stage who were just talking about their boyfriends or something. But I guess that record reminds me that I've had some good times in my life. And
absolutely.
I have the record. That's one of my good times. The I made before that one was produced by a friend of mine, and it also has the late Sean Benjamin.
Yes.
And so
what a great player.
But the one I was telling you about, if I'm going to give a blurb, the best one, and it was kind of, I guess it's my swan song, because it was just a year before I got sick. I did record it with a friend of mine. His name is Keith Oxman, and he records with Capri Records. And I did 2 songs on his album, and they came out really nice. And then that's the last thing I did before I got COVID and lost my voice. So I told myself that was my swan song. I can live with it.
Oh, you're forever the queen of jazz and blues in our city, Annette. That's absolutely true. A couple of final questions, if I may, as we finish up today. We have a lot of journalism majors in the Nebraska Promise, First Husker, and Emerging Leaders program. What's the most rewarding job or part of your job as a radio host at NET?
Well,
you're a part of my weekend. I know that.
I think that's the most rewarding part. It's just you in the studio, but it's a sense of intimacy. I mean, it really is being with people. And I always visualize, real people who are there. And I think because it's live radio, one of the things I value about the job is that if you make a mistake, you just have to move on. You don't have time for recriminations or any kind of self-flagellation. You've got to move on because you've got to pull yourself together and focus and do the next break better. In terms of your journalism students, we have a great news department, and Fred Knapp, who's a reporter for Nebraska Public Media News.
Oh, I know Fred.
We're born on the same day, and we're great buddies. And I love when he comes into the studio. We talk about the stories that he's done. And so
I used to work at the Capitol with Fred.
Yes,
what a guy.
Yes, I love it. And but also here, we have at Aging Partners, which is my day gig and my mortgage gig. We have a newsletter that we put out every month. And we also have a magazine that comes out quarterly. And so, I take that, I don't publish it, but I'm one of the people that have to edit it. And I take that just as seriously as any other.
Absolutely.
And
there go
it
your
does
writing
make a difference
talents.
because it makes a difference in the lives of people who come to our senior centers and people who
you bet it does.
Need to have some connection. And so that's one of the things I do like about my weekday job. It's just that I'm helping folks like me make connections with other people and to stay involved and stay active.
Right. And Nat, I'd like to finish with something too. And if I may share this in part of our personal correspondence, I really admire the focus, as you put it, of focusing on yourself as you're in this stage of your life. And you posited it as, I see myself as a garden and I'm cultivating that garden right now. How well said is that? And that's what a worthwhile way to go about things.
Well, thank you. But but it doesn't mean just sort of navel, as they say, navel gazing.
Right.
What it does mean is a garden. You can grow flowers, and you can also grow produce. And so, how can my garden bring beauty and nourishment to myself, but also to others? Who am I here to create beauty for, and who am I here to nourish? And as I said, I have a grandbaby who'll be 2 years old in December, and I really I just see my son and what a beautiful father he is, and that has just touched my heart. And the thing about it is, although I've never stopped being his mother, you're still a parent. You're just a parent of a man, who's 35, who has a son who's almost 2. And finding the different ways that you have to be a parent. So yes, I have a garden that I want to cultivate because I really want to be. I feel I spent so many years being someone else's definition of who I should be. Right. And I really want to. I really want to be the person that I feel that I should be. And the person that I think is the most effective in the world to do whatever I'm responsible for, and trying to bring about a world that's just for everyone, that's plentiful for everyone. As a friend of mine said, the revolution wasn't supposed to make everybody poor. It was supposed to make everybody rich. How can I enrich the lives of others?
Oh, I love it. Annette, thank you so much.
Thank you. I've had a wonderful time. Although I don't see your students, thank you for all your wonderful questions. Please live your lives in the way that's most comfortable for you, and do your part, to make this world better, because if you don't do it, nobody will. And, we are going down the road of fascism, and we've got to stop it. So do your best to help us avert that road.
It's a real personal honor for me to be able to speak with you. I'm a big fan of yours.
Thank you.
And I look forward to what is coming next from you that way. Maybe I'll buy you a beer at the Zoo Bar one day. Who knows? Stranger things have happened.
All righty.
Annette, you're very generous. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.